The man standing outside the military gate looked like someone with no power at all. But within minutes, everyone inside the base would realize they had been standing in front of a 4-star general. The night air was cold over Fort Liberty, North Carolina, as soft rain covered the empty roads surrounding one of the nation's largest military installations. The bright lights above the security entrance reflected across the wet pavement, creating a quiet scene that appeared completely ordinary. But sometimes the most important moments begin in places where nobody expects them. Near the main gate stood a man wearing a simple dark jacket, gray trousers, and a calm expression that revealed nothing about his past. His name was Nathaniel Brooks. To anyone passing by, he looked like another person waiting for someone inside the base. No uniform, no medals, no group of officers around him. No obvious signs that he had spent decades serving his country. He simply stood there, patient and composed, watching the entrance while waiting for his scheduled meeting. Then a patrol vehicle approached. Officer Ryan Caldwell, a white police officer assigned to security support in the area, slowed down as he noticed Nathan standing near the gate. Ryan had spent years believing that attention to detail was what kept people safe. He believed every unusual situation needed to be questioned. But sometimes the greatest mistakes happen when people believe they already understand what they are seeing. Ryan stepped out of his vehicle and walked toward Nathan. "Evening. Can I ask why you are standing here?" he asked. Nathan turned calmly and answered, "I am waiting for my contact inside the base." His voice was respectful and steady. There was no panic, no frustration, just confidence. Ryan looked at him carefully. Something about Nathan's calm response made him curious. Most people immediately tried to explain themselves when questioned. Nathan did not. He simply answered and waited. "Do you have identification?" Ryan asked. Nathan reached into his wallet and provided his identification without hesitation. He had nothing to hide. He understood that security procedures existed for a reason. But as Ryan looked at the information in front of him, he focused on what he thought he knew instead of what he did not know. He saw a black man near a restricted military entrance. He did not yet see a lifetime of service. He did not see the years of leadership, sacrifice, and responsibility behind the person standing in front of him. Nathan noticed the change in Ryan's expression, but he remained calm. He had experienced moments throughout his life when people formed opinions before learning the truth. He had learned that patience was not weakness. Sometimes patience was the strongest response a person could choose. The rain continued falling. The base remained quiet. The two men stood facing each other beneath the lights of the entrance, unaware that this simple encounter was about to reveal a lesson neither of them would forget. Because one man believed he was questioning a stranger. He had no idea he was standing before someone the entire base had spent years learning to follow. People often believe they can recognize power by what they see. A uniform, a badge, a title. But sometimes the person with the greatest authority is the one standing quietly in the background, waiting to be noticed only when the truth arrives. The rain continued falling over Fort Liberty, North Carolina, as Officer Ryan Caldwell stood near the security entrance studying the identification provided by Nathaniel Brooks. The military base remained active in the distance, with vehicles moving through checkpoints and personnel completing their evening duties. Yet at the entrance where Ryan and Nathan stood, everything felt unusually still. Ryan looked at the information again, searching for something that matched the situation in his mind. He had spent years working in law enforcement, and he believed his instincts helped him identify problems before they happened. But instincts could also become assumptions when they were not guided by patience. "You understand this area requires proper authorization," Ryan said. Nathan nodded. "I understand." His answer was simple. There was no argument, no attempt to avoid the process. Nathan knew that security mattered. He respected the people responsible for protecting important locations. But he also understood something Ryan had not yet learned. Respect was supposed to work both ways. Ryan looked at Nathan's calm expression and became more uncertain. The man in front of him did not act like someone trying to hide something. He acted like someone who knew the truth would eventually speak for itself. "Who are you meeting tonight?" Ryan asked. Nathan paused briefly before answering. "Someone from the command office." That response caught Ryan's attention. But instead of becoming curious, he became more suspicious. He wondered why someone would remain so calm during a security check. He did not realize that Nathan's confidence came from decades of experience handling difficult situations. Long before standing outside that gate, Nathan had learned that leadership required patience. When he first joined the United States Army, he was not the person people would later recognize. He was a young soldier with a desire to serve and a belief that commitment mattered more than recognition. Over the years, he earned responsibility through discipline, dedication, and the trust of those around him. He learned that true leaders did not need to announce their importance. Their actions spoke before their titles ever did. But standing outside the gate without his uniform, without his rank displayed, Nathan experienced something he had encountered throughout his life. Some people noticed the person. Others noticed only what they expected to see. Ryan continued reviewing the information while the rain tapped softly against the pavement. Nearby, several military personnel passed through the entrance. A few glanced toward Nathan, but they did not interrupt. They seemed to recognize something familiar about him. His posture, his presence, the quiet confidence of someone who had spent years carrying responsibility. Ryan noticed their reactions but did not understand them yet. To him, this was still a simple security situation. A person near a military entrance. A routine conversation. A moment that would soon be forgotten. But what Ryan did not know was that the man standing in front of him represented years of service and leadership. He did not know that the base around him would soon look at Nathan Brooks very differently. And he definitely did not know that the biggest mistake of the evening was not failing to recognize a title. It was failing to recognize the person behind it. There are moments when silence reveals more than words ever could. And standing beneath the lights of Fort Liberty, North Carolina, Nathaniel Brooks showed something Officer Ryan Caldwell could not yet understand. The man in front of him was not avoiding questions because he had something to hide. He was remaining calm because he had spent a lifetime learning how to handle pressure. The rain continued falling softly as Ryan completed his review of Nathan's identification. The officer looked up again, studying the man's expression. There was no nervousness, no frustration, no sign of someone trying to escape responsibility. Instead, Nathan stood with the same quiet confidence he had carried since the beginning of their conversation. "You are being very patient," Ryan said. Nathan looked at him and replied, "Patience is important when people are trying to understand a situation." The answer was respectful, but it carried a deeper meaning. Nathan had spent decades learning that leadership was not about reacting quickly. It was about understanding completely before making a decision. Ryan looked toward the entrance of the base. Personnel continued moving through the security area, but something about the situation felt different now. A few soldiers passing nearby glanced toward Nathan. Some slowed their steps for a moment. They did not interrupt, but their expressions showed recognition. Ryan noticed this. He noticed the way people looked at Nathan, but he could not explain why. To him, Nathan was still just a man waiting near a restricted area. He did not yet see the years behind that calm expression. He did not see the responsibility Nathan had carried or the trust he had earned from thousands of people throughout his career. Nathan had always understood that removing a uniform could change how strangers viewed him. The stars on his shoulders, the official ceremonies, and the recognition that came with his position were not visible tonight. All that remained was the person himself. And that was something Nathan valued. He believed the measure of a person should never depend on what symbols they carried. It should depend on the choices they made when nobody was watching. Years earlier, before he became one of the highest-ranking leaders in the United States Army, Nathan was simply a young man searching for a purpose. He entered military service with determination and a willingness to learn. He did not begin his journey with influence. He built it through commitment. Every promotion, every responsibility, and every leadership role came from years of dedication. But despite reaching the highest levels of command, Nathan never forgot the lessons that shaped him. He remembered what it felt like to be underestimated. He remembered moments when people noticed what they expected to see instead of the person standing before them. That memory made him a different kind of leader. He understood the importance of listening. He understood the impact of first impressions. He understood that every person carried a story that was invisible to the outside world. Back at the gate, Ryan returned Nathan's identification. The officer still believed he was handling a normal security matter, but something inside him had started to question his first impression. The calm man standing in front of him was not acting like someone with no options. He was acting like someone who knew the truth would eventually arrive. And as the rain continued falling over the military base, the first signs of that truth were already beginning to appear. The most dangerous mistakes are often made in the moments when people believe they are doing the right thing. At Fort Liberty, North Carolina, Officer Ryan Caldwell still believed he was protecting the base. He believed he was following procedure. He believed he was simply asking questions. But the difference between responsibility and assumption can be found in a single decision. The rain continued falling as Nathaniel Brooks stood quietly near the security entrance. His identification had been returned, but the conversation was not over. Ryan looked at him with a different kind of attention now. Something had changed. The officer could sense that there was more to this situation than he first understood, but he still held onto his original impression. "I need to be clear," Ryan said. "This area is not somewhere people can simply walk into." Nathan nodded. "I understand." His response was calm, almost too calm for Ryan. The officer expected more explanation. He expected Nathan to become impatient or defensive. Instead, Nathan continued showing the same level of respect he had shown from the beginning. That patience made the situation harder for Ryan to understand. Around them, the activity of the military base continued. Vehicles passed through the entrance. Personnel moved between buildings. The ordinary rhythm of the evening continued, but a few people had started noticing what was happening near the gate. A young soldier walking by looked toward Nathan and immediately recognized something familiar. Not the clothing, not a visible rank. Something deeper. The way Nathan stood. The way he carried himself. The quiet confidence of someone who had spent years making important decisions. The soldier slowed down but continued walking, unsure if he should interrupt. Ryan noticed the reaction but did not understand its meaning. "Do you have any additional information proving why you are here?" Ryan asked. Nathan looked at him for a moment. "Officer, sometimes the information you need is already available. The question is whether people take the time to see it." The words were not an insult. They were a reminder. Nathan had learned throughout his career that people often rush to conclusions because conclusions felt easier than understanding. He had seen it in meetings. He had seen it during moments of pressure. And now, standing outside a military gate, he saw it again. The difference was that he had the experience to remain calm. Ryan, however, was beginning to feel the weight of uncertainty. He looked at Nathan differently now. Not because he knew who he was, but because he realized he might not know anything about him at all. The officer looked back at the entrance of the base. More people were beginning to notice the situation. A few exchanged quiet looks. Something about the man standing there was causing recognition among those who knew the military world. Nathan remained still. He did not call anyone. He did not announce his position. He did not use his influence to end the conversation. He simply waited, because Nathan Brooks understood something Ryan had not learned yet. Real authority does not need to introduce itself. It reveals itself when the moment is right. And that moment was getting closer with every passing second. The truth often appears in small details that people choose to ignore. And at Fort Liberty, North Carolina, those details were beginning to surround Officer Ryan Caldwell. The rain continued falling over the military base as the quiet moment near the security entrance slowly became something much bigger than a routine conversation. Ryan still stood with the confidence of someone who believed he understood the situation. But around him, subtle signs were beginning to challenge that belief. Nathaniel Brooks remained calm, standing beneath the soft glow of the security lights. He did not look frustrated. He did not look concerned. He simply waited. That patience was becoming the one thing Ryan could not explain. "You seem very comfortable for someone being questioned at a military entrance," Ryan said. Nathan looked at him calmly. "Comfort comes from knowing you have nothing to hide." The answer was simple, but it carried the weight of a person who had spent a lifetime facing difficult situations. Ryan looked back toward the base entrance. A few more military personnel had noticed Nathan. They did not approach immediately, but their reactions were different from ordinary curiosity. There was a sense of recognition. A young officer passing through the checkpoint stopped for a moment and quietly observed. He looked at Nathan's face, then at the way he carried himself. Something seemed familiar. He had seen that kind of presence before. It was the presence of someone who had spent years leading others. But before he could say anything, he continued walking, waiting for the right moment. Ryan noticed these reactions. He noticed that people were looking at Nathan with a level of respect that did not match the situation he believed he was handling. "Do you know anyone else here who can confirm your visit?" Ryan asked. Nathan nodded. "Yes. Then why not call them?" Ryan questioned. Nathan looked toward the entrance and then back at him. "Because the truth should not depend on who makes the first call." The response stayed with Ryan. He had expected someone trying to prove importance. Instead, he was seeing someone who did not need recognition to remain confident. Nathan had always believed that leadership was revealed most clearly when people had the opportunity to use power but chose patience instead. Throughout his career, he had witnessed moments when people judged others without understanding their background. He knew first impressions could be powerful, but he also knew they could be wrong. The person standing in front of Ryan was not asking for special treatment. He was asking for something much simpler, to be seen as a person before being seen as a situation. Then another figure appeared near the entrance. Colonel Emily Hart stepped outside after receiving a message from the command office. She looked toward the gate, and the moment her eyes found Nathan, her expression changed. Not with surprise, not with confusion, with recognition. She immediately understood what was happening. Ryan noticed her reaction. He noticed the way she walked toward Nathan with complete respect. The officer who thought he understood the situation was now watching something he could not explain. The pieces were beginning to connect. The quiet man without a uniform was not an ordinary visitor. The person he had been questioning was someone the entire base knew. And soon, Ryan would discover that the biggest mistake of the evening was not failing to check information. It was failing to understand the person standing right in front of him. The truth behind a person is often found in the journey that shaped them. Before anyone recognized Nathaniel Brooks at the gate of Fort Liberty, before anyone understood why experienced officers treated him with respect, there was a lifetime of dedication that built the man standing quietly in the rain. Colonel Emily Hart walked toward the entrance with a calm expression, already understanding the situation unfolding in front of her. She had worked with Nathan for many years. She knew his leadership style. She knew his patience. And she knew he was not someone who needed others to announce his importance. Ryan Caldwell watched carefully as Emily approached. The difference in the atmosphere was impossible to ignore. The same man who had been standing alone moments earlier was now being greeted with the respect usually reserved for the highest levels of military leadership. But Nathan remained exactly the same. He did not change his tone. He did not change his posture. He did not suddenly act more important because others recognized him. That was what made him different. Nathan understood that a title could open doors, but character was what people remembered after the doors closed. His story began many years earlier, long before he became a four-star general. He grew up in a family that valued hard work, responsibility, and service. His parents taught him that success was not measured by what people could see. It was measured by the effort someone was willing to give when nobody was watching. When Nathan joined the United States Army, he was not searching for attention. He was searching for purpose. He started his career as a young soldier who understood that every opportunity came with responsibility. He spent years learning, listening, and developing the discipline required to lead others. He did not rise because he demanded recognition. He rose because people trusted him. Throughout his career, Nathan faced moments when his appearance caused others to underestimate him. He understood what it felt like to enter a room and realize some people had already created a story about him before hearing his words. But instead of allowing those moments to change him, he used them as reminders of why leadership mattered. He believed every person deserved to be judged by their actions and character, not by assumptions made from a distance. As years passed, Nathan became one of the most respected leaders in the United States Army. He carried greater responsibilities, made difficult decisions, and guided countless people through challenging moments. Yet, despite reaching the highest levels of command, he never forgot the lessons that shaped him. He remembered the importance of humility. He remembered the value of patience. He remembered that power was not about making others feel small. Back at the gate, Ryan Caldwell was beginning to understand that the man in front of him represented far more than a simple identification check. He was not just a visitor waiting for permission to enter. He was someone who had spent a lifetime earning the respect of people around him. Ryan had focused on what he could see, but now, he was starting to realize that the most important parts of a person are often the things that cannot be seen immediately. And as Colonel Hart stood beside Nathan, the truth that had been hidden all evening was finally moving closer to the surface. The truth can remain hidden for only so long. And at Fort Liberty, North Carolina, the moment everyone had been unknowingly waiting for was finally arriving. The rain continued falling softly around the security entrance as Colonel Emily Hart stood beside Nathaniel Brooks. Officer Ryan Caldwell watched the scene carefully, trying to understand how a simple conversation had changed so quickly. Just minutes earlier, he believed he was dealing with an unknown individual near a restricted area. Now, experienced military personnel were looking at Nathan with a level of respect that could not be ignored. Emily looked at Ryan and spoke calmly. "Officer Caldwell, this is General Nathaniel Brooks." The words were simple, but they carried enormous weight. Ryan remained silent for a moment. The name meant something now, not because of a title alone, but because of the reaction around him. The young soldiers passing through the entrance recognized him. The officers nearby adjusted their attention. The entire atmosphere of the base had changed. Nathan, however, remained calm. He looked at Ryan, not with anger, but with understanding. He knew this moment could easily become about embarrassment or pride. But that was never what mattered to him. What mattered was the lesson behind it. "Officer," Nathan said, "I understand you were doing your job." Ryan looked at him, surprised by the response. He expected disappointment. He expected criticism. Instead, he heard patience. Nathan continued, "The responsibility of protecting others is important. But so is remembering that every person you meet has a story you may not know." Those words affected Ryan more than any accusation could have. Because the truth was becoming clear. The problem was not that Ryan asked questions. Asking questions was part of his responsibility. The problem was that he allowed assumptions to shape the way he saw the person standing in front of him. Around them, more members of the base began to recognize Nathan. The quiet man who had been standing alone near the gate was now revealed as one of the highest-ranking leaders in the United States Army. But even with that recognition, Nathan did not change. He did not use the attention to make anyone feel smaller. He did not need to. His leadership had already spoken through his actions. Ryan looked around at the people surrounding them. He noticed something important. Nobody was reacting to Nathan because of fear. They were reacting because of respect. That difference stayed with him. Fear could make people obey for a moment. Respect was earned over a lifetime. Nathan had earned it through years of service, discipline, and dedication. Emily watched quietly as the situation unfolded. She knew Nathan had every opportunity to make the moment about his position. He could have immediately shown his authority. He could have turned the entire situation into a lesson about rank. But that was not who he was. He chose a different kind of leadership. He chose to show why he had reached the highest levels of command in the first place. As the rain began to slow, Ryan finally understood the reality of the evening. The man he had questioned was not someone trying to prove he belonged. He was someone who had spent a lifetime proving himself through service. And now, standing at the entrance of the base surrounded by those who respected him, Nathaniel Brooks showed everyone the difference between having power and having true authority. The most important moments of change often happen after the truth has already been revealed. At Fort Liberty, North Carolina, the rain had nearly stopped, but the lesson from that evening was only beginning. Officer Ryan Caldwell stood near the security entrance, still thinking about everything that had happened in the past few minutes. The situation had started as a simple interaction, but it had become something much deeper. He had looked at Nathaniel Brooks and seen only what was visible on the surface. Now he understood that there was an entire lifetime behind the man he had questioned. Nathan remained near the gate with the same calm presence he had shown from the beginning. He did not celebrate the moment. He did not use his position to make Ryan feel embarrassed. Instead, he treated the situation as an opportunity for understanding. Colonel Emily Hart watched quietly as the two men continued their conversation. She knew Nathan well enough to understand why he handled the moment this way. Throughout his career, Nathan had faced many situations where people made quick judgments. He had learned that the strongest response was not always proving someone wrong. Sometimes the strongest response was showing them a better way forward. Ryan finally spoke. "General Brooks, I realize now that I did not understand the situation completely." Nathan nodded. "That is something we all experience at some point. The important thing is what we do after we recognize it." The answer surprised Ryan. He expected a lecture. He expected a reminder of the difference between their positions. Instead, Nathan spoke to him as another person. That was the kind of leadership Ryan was beginning to understand. True leaders did not need to make others feel powerless to prove their own strength. They used their influence to create better outcomes. As the security team completed their review of the situation, Ryan remained nearby. He watched the way people interacted with Nathan. Soldiers, officers, and staff members did not respect him because of a title alone. They respected him because they knew the person behind the title. They knew the years of commitment. They knew the decisions he had made. They knew the responsibility he carried. That was something Ryan had not considered earlier. A uniform could show a role, but it could not reveal a person's entire story. Nathan eventually turned toward the entrance, preparing to continue his evening responsibilities. Before leaving, he looked back at Ryan. "Officer Caldwell, never forget that every person you meet is carrying something you cannot see." Ryan listened carefully. The sentence was simple, but it stayed with him, because it represented the difference between judgment and understanding. Later that night, Ryan sat in his patrol vehicle reviewing the events in his mind. He thought about how quickly he had created an opinion. He thought about how little he actually knew about the person standing in front of him. The experience changed the way he looked at future encounters. Not because someone forced him to change, but because he finally understood the importance of looking beyond the first impression. Meanwhile, Nathan returned to his duties at the base. The moment at the gate became just another chapter in a lifetime of service. But for Ryan, it became a reminder that the most powerful lessons do not always come from commands or orders. Sometimes they come from a quiet conversation with someone who had every reason to be angry, but chose instead to show what true leadership looked like. The greatest lessons are not always remembered because of what happened. They are remembered because of what changed afterward. Days had passed since the evening at Fort Liberty, North Carolina, but the moment at the gate continued to stay with everyone who witnessed it. For Nathaniel Brooks, life returned to its usual rhythm. Meetings, responsibilities, and decisions filled his schedule. As a four-star general, he carried important duties every day, but the experience at the gate reminded him of something he had always believed. Leadership was not only about making decisions. It was about understanding people. Nathan continued serving with the same humility that had guided him throughout his entire career. He never viewed the moment with Officer Ryan Caldwell as a victory. To him, there was no victory in proving someone wrong. The real achievement was creating a moment where understanding could replace judgment. Ryan, however, carried the memory differently. The encounter changed the way he approached his work. He thought about the first moment he saw Nathan standing near the gate. He remembered the assumptions he made before knowing the truth. He remembered how quickly he believed he understood the situation. What stayed with him most was not Nathan's rank. It was Nathan's response. A person with every reason to use authority had chosen patience instead. That lesson became more powerful than any official explanation could have been. Over time, Ryan became more aware of the importance of listening before reaching conclusions. He learned that every person he met had experiences, challenges, and stories that were invisible from the outside. He understood that responsibility was not only about following procedures. It was also about recognizing the humanity of the people those procedures affected. At Fort Liberty, Nathan continued inspiring those around him. Younger soldiers often looked to him as an example of what leadership should represent. He reminded them that respect was earned through actions, not demanded through position. He told them that the strongest leaders were not the ones who needed everyone to know their importance. They were the ones who continued doing the right thing even when nobody was watching. The story of that night at the gate eventually became a quiet reminder among those who knew about it. It was not remembered because a general was finally recognized. It was remembered because a simple encounter revealed a much bigger truth. A person's value cannot be measured by appearance, assumptions, or first impressions. It can only be understood through character. Ryan learned that a badge gave him responsibility, but it did not give him permission to stop seeing people as individuals. Nathan showed that true authority was not about demanding recognition. It was about carrying power with wisdom and compassion. And in the end, the moment that began with misunderstanding became a lesson about respect, accountability, and the importance of seeing beyond what is immediately visible. Because sometimes the person standing quietly in front of you is carrying a story far greater than anything you could imagine.